When you read our textbook's description of hunter-gatherers, or if you actually just look in any book's description of hunter-gatherer society, you end up finding a lot of details which at first are kind of hard to believe. If you read about hunter-gatherers, authors like Spievogel or other historians will tell you that ancient hunter-gatherers in the Paleolithic era lived in relatively small nomadic bands, that they had relatively little differentiation between male and female roles, that they had small family sizes that were intentionally kept small through infanticide. All sorts of details which, as a historian, I always kind of had to ask, how the heck do they know this? Because historians tend to know about the past from writing. Right? That's what historians are. They're people who study ancient writing, ancient texts to learn about previous societies and civilizations. And hunter-gatherers are the quintessential prehistoric people, people without writing. And therefore, the intimate details of their lives, you have to wonder, how could we possibly know this? In my face-to-face classes, I always ask my students, kind of to come up with some thoughts on how we could know this. And they come up with interesting answers. Some of them will say cave paintings might tell us about ancient prehistoric life. But that's actually pretty problematic because most cave paintings aren't descriptions of daily life. They're paintings of people's hands, or they're paintings of animals, or they're paintings of hunters, but they're not pictures of daily life as a hunter-gatherer. Some people say archaeological remains would tell us something, and they do to a certain extent, but archaeologists are best at finding remains in settled locations, not hunter-gatherers, who by definition are wandering around, don't have cities, don't have fixed communities, fixed cemeteries, and the like. So we're kind of left with the question, how do we know what we know about ancient hunter-gatherer societies? And the answer might surprise you. In fact, much of our knowledge of ancient hunter-gatherer societies comes from anthropologists who study modern-day hunter-gatherer societies. If you look today in the Amazon rainforest or in the deserts in China, you can still find modern-day hunter-gatherers who travel from place to place and live the same kind of lifestyle, or at least a similar lifestyle, to what people would have lived back in the quote-unquote Stone Age. However, there are some real problems with basing our knowledge of ancient hunter-gatherers on modern-day hunter-gatherers. First of all, modern-day hunter-gatherers tend to live in the most god-awful places on Earth, and not by choice. Right? If you had to make your choice whether you'd live in the deserts of China or if you'd live in a lush tropical paradise, most people would choose to live in the lush tropical paradise. But the reason most modern-day hunter-gatherers live in the deepest sections of the Amazon rainforest or in inhospitable deserts is because they've been pushed out of other locations by sedentary people, by cities, by modern-day people. And so it's a little dangerous to draw conclusions about what life was like in the ancient world when hunter-gatherers lived in rich, lush, beautiful climates based on the way people live today in much harsher climates. We know, for instance, that there is some evidence that in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, Native American hunter-gatherers lived in societies that were very different from modern-day hunter-gatherers. They had large tribes instead of small tribes. They were not nomadic. They lived in fixed locations, and they lived in the same place year-round. Why? Because the environment was so lush and so rich, and there was so much fish in the sea, that they were able to survive without moving around. And so in many ways we know that the assumptions we have about ancient hunter-gatherers are not always correct, especially if we base them solely on the study of modern-day hunter-gatherers. I think this is a good example of one of the dangers historians run into when they rely on analogy, when they try to assume that people in the past are much like people today, and that they must react and respond to things in the same way that people today do. In some cases that's true, but in other cases it certainly isn't. And so I want you to think about this week and throughout the rest of the semester about the otherness of people in the past, the distance between people today and people who lived 1, 2, even 3,000 years ago.